The notary stopped mid-sentence. She looked up from the document in front of her, slowly, the way someone does when they've just read something they weren't expecting. The room went quiet. My brother's lawyer cleared his throat, and my brother, the one who'd spent the last 40 minutes calling me a burden on this family, finally stopped talking. I didn't say a word. I had learned a long time ago that silence, in the right moment, says everything. My name is Claire Mackenzie. I'm 31 years old, and I grew up in a 2-story house on the edge of Orangeville, Ontario, the kind of town where everyone knows your last name and your grandmother's last name, and probably has an opinion about both. The house had a wraparound porch that sagged on the left side, a backyard that turned into a skating rink every January, and a kitchen that always smelled like my mother's butter tarts, whether she was baking or not. I loved that house the way you love something before you understand what love costs. I was the youngest of 3. My brother David was 9 years older than me, and my brother Marcus was 7 years older. By the time I started high school, both of them had already built their lives, David in real estate development in Mississauga, Marcus running a logistics company out of Calgary. They had opinions about everything: where to invest, what to drive, who to marry. They had even stronger opinions about me. I was the one who stayed close to home. I was the one who drove my mother to her chemotherapy appointments in Brampton every second Tuesday for 14 months. I was the one who sat in those beige waiting rooms with bad lighting and worse coffee, reading her chapters from her favorite Maeve Binchy novels until she fell asleep in the chair. I was the one who called her oncologist's office when her prescription wasn't covered and spent 2 hours on hold with the provincial drug benefit program to sort it out. David sent money. I will give him that. Marcus sent a fruit basket at Christmas with a card that said "Thinking of you" in pre-printed script. My mother recovered. Partial remission, which her doctor said was more than they'd hoped for. We celebrated quietly. Just the 2 of us, with takeout butter chicken from the place on Broadway she'd been craving for months. She squeezed my hand across the kitchen table and said, "You kept me going, Claire. I hope you know that." I know it sounds like the kind of thing a mother says, but she meant it, and I held on to it. 3 years later, my mother had a second stroke. This one was worse. She spent 6 weeks in Headwaters Healthcare Center and came home needing full-time support. My brothers flew in, assessed the situation the way they assessed everything quickly, efficiently, with an eye toward outcomes, and within a week had agreed on a plan. A care home in Barrie. Comfortable, they said. Modern, reasonable. My mother cried the night they told her. I had already been looking into other options. I'd spoken to a home care coordinator through the CCAC, looked into the Ontario Caregiver Support Program, researched what modifications the house would need for a wheelchair. I presented all of this at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon in October, the maple out front already deep red. David leaned back in his chair. He had that look he gets, the patient, slightly tired look of a man who believes he is the only adult in any given room. "Claire," he said, "you're not thinking practically. She wants to stay in her house," I said. "What she wants and what's feasible are 2 different things," Marcus said. He had his phone face up on the table, which he kept glancing at. "You're not a nurse. You can't manage this on your own. I'm not planning to manage it alone. There's a funded..." "You're 28 years old," David said. "You have your whole life ahead of you. You shouldn't be doing this." What he meant was, this is not how we do things in this family. What he also meant, though he didn't say it yet, was, and we'd rather you didn't, because it complicates the estate. My mother stayed in her house. I moved into the spare bedroom and managed her care for the next 2 years with the help of a part-time PSW and a lot of very early mornings. My brothers visited at Christmas and Thanksgiving. They were cordial. They brought wine. They left on the 27th. My mother passed on a Tuesday in March, quietly, in her own bed, with the window open the way she liked it, even in winter. The maple outside was just starting to bud. I had been holding her hand. The grief was its own country. I won't try to describe it properly here because I don't think I can, and I don't think it's the point. What I'll say is that within 11 days of her funeral, David had called a meeting about the estate. My mother had not left a complex will. The house in Orangeville, valued at that point around $610,000, plus savings and a small RRSP, totaling just under $820,000 combined. Her original will, written 12 years earlier, divided everything equally 3 ways. The problem, David explained, was that he and Marcus had each contributed financially during her illness. David had sent money monthly around $1,400 a month for 2 years, he said, though I had never seen a full accounting. Marcus had covered 2 of the medical equipment rentals. They believed these contributions warranted an adjustment to the distribution. I listened. "We're not trying to be unfair," Marcus said. He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "We just think the split should reflect what everyone put in." "And what I put in?" I asked. "You were living there," David said, "rent-free, for 2 years. There it was. I had expected it. It still landed like a stone. "I also provided full-time care," I said, keeping my voice even. "No one asked you to do that," David said. "That was your choice. Mom asked me to. Mom wasn't in a position to make those decisions clearly." I looked at him for a long moment. He held my gaze in that steady, practiced way of his, the way he probably holds it across boardroom tables. I thought of all the Tuesday mornings in Brampton. I thought of 14 months of chemotherapy. I thought of my mother's hand in mine. "All right," I said. "Get your lawyer." David did get his lawyer. A firm from Mississauga, 2 partners and a junior associate who all wore the same style of charcoal suit. They proposed a revised distribution. David and Marcus would each receive 37.5% of the estate, and I would receive 25%, with the rationale that my 2 years of rent-free accommodation represented a material benefit that should be offset against my share. They also proposed that the house be sold immediately. I hired my own representation. Her name was Patricia Bonsu, and she worked out of a small office above a dry cleaner on First Street in Collingwood. And she had 22 years of estate litigation experience, and the calm, slightly amused expression of someone who has heard every version of this argument before. "They're allowed to try," she said, reviewing the proposal across her desk. "But there are a few things they may not have fully considered." She asked me to bring documentation. I brought everything: the CCAC correspondence, the care coordination records, the pharmacy receipts, the emails to her oncologist's office, the home modification invoices, the mileage logs from the Brampton appointments. I had kept everything, not because I was planning for this moment, but because I am the kind of person who keeps records. A habit from my work, which I'll explain in a moment. Patricia looked through the folders without expression. Then she made a few notes and looked up. "What do you do for work?" she asked. "I don't think you told me." I told her. She nodded slowly. Then she smiled, just slightly. "Do your brothers know that?" "I've never made a point of mentioning it," I said. The meeting was held at the office of the estate trustee, a notary named Gerald Howarth, who operated out of a low beige building in Orangeville, 2 streets over from where I'd grown up. The kind of office with a large wooden desk and framed certificates and a bowl of individually wrapped peppermints by the door. David and Marcus arrived together, their lawyer between them. I arrived with Patricia, who was carrying 2 accordion folders and her own coffee thermos. The opening exchange was professional. Gerald walked through the estate inventory. The Mississauga lawyer presented the revised distribution rationale, smoothly and at length, with references to Ontario's Succession Law Reform Act and the concept of unjust enrichment. He was good. I could see why David had hired him. Then it was Patricia's turn. She started with the care documentation. The records I had brought itemized, as best as could be reconstructed, the equivalent market value of the care I had provided, the PSW coordination, the medical transportation, the advocacy work with the health system, the hours of direct personal care. She had cross-referenced these with current Ontario home care rates. The figure she presented was $214,000 over 26 months. She was careful to note this was a conservative estimate. David's lawyer looked up from his notes. Care provided by a family member in a domestic setting is not typically compensable under the SLRA. Yes, Patricia said pleasantly. We're not arguing compensation, we're arguing unjust enrichment in reverse. If the estate is to be adjusted to reflect material contributions, then all material contributions should be on the table. David shifted in his chair. Additionally, Patricia continued, sliding a second document across the table, I'd like to draw attention to the Ontario Caregiver Recognition Act and the supporting literature on the economic value of unpaid caregiving, which the provincial government has formally acknowledged since 2017. Gerald picked up the document and read it quietly. And finally, Patricia said, I'd like to introduce a brief summary of my client's professional background, which I believe is relevant to this conversation. The Mississauga lawyer frowned. I'm not sure how. Bear with me, Patricia said. She slid a third document across. It was 1 page. My CV, essentially, though that's a modest word for what was on it. Gerald read it. His expression didn't change dramatically, but something in the set of his face shifted. He looked up at me, then back down at the page, then at Patricia. Your client is a... Yes, Patricia said. David's lawyer took the document when Gerald passed it over. He read the first few lines. He stopped. He read them again. The room was very quiet. I watched my brother David's face go through several things in quick succession. Confusion first, then something I can only describe as recalibration. I don't understand, Marcus said, picking up the document. He read it. He set it down. Since when? Since I was 24, I said. I should explain. Because context matters. I have worked since my mid-20s as a federally licensed insolvency trustee, what used to be called a bankruptcy trustee, now more formally a licensed insolvency trustee under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. It is a regulated profession in Canada, overseen by the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy. It requires a specific designation, years of supervised experience, and passing a federal licensing exam. There are fewer than 1,200 of us in the country. It is not a glamorous job, and it is not one that comes up easily in conversation. When people ask what I do at family dinners, I tend to say financial services and change the subject, because explaining it fully takes longer than most people want to spend, and it usually prompts one of two responses. Either they want advice about their debt, or they look at me differently in a way that I've never entirely known how to receive. My brothers knew I worked in finance. They did not know the details. I had never made a point of the designation. What the document also showed, what Gerald and the Mississauga lawyer were now reading, was that in the course of my work, I had spent the last several years handling estates, corporate insolvencies, and consumer proposals across Simcoe and Dufferin counties. I had processed, at that point, over 200 files. I had testified as an expert witness in 3 Ontario Superior Court proceedings. I had served on the advisory board of a regional nonprofit focused on financial literacy for seniors. I understood the Succession Law Reform Act. I understood estate administration. I had, in fact, processed estate files that were more complex than my mother's. I had said nothing about any of this at any point, because no one had asked, and because I had not come to this meeting to perform. I had come to protect what my mother wanted. Gerald set the document down. He folded his hands. He looked at David's lawyer across the table with an expression that was not unkind but was very clear. "Counselor," he said, "I think you may want to take a few minutes with your clients." David's lawyer asked for a recess. We moved to the small waiting area by the peppermints. I stood by the window. Patricia stood beside me, drinking her coffee. Outside, First Avenue was gray and quiet, a light snow just starting to come down. "How are you doing?" she asked. "I'm all right," I said. "You don't have to be," she said. I didn't answer. I was thinking about the last time I had stood in this part of town, which was the week after my mother's diagnosis 7 years ago, walking back from the pharmacy with a bag full of anti-nausea medication and a printed list of questions for the next oncology appointment, feeling for the first time like the ground had shifted under me permanently. I was thinking about David standing in our mother's kitchen saying, "No one asked you to do that." I was thinking about the way my mother had squeezed my hand across the table over butter chicken, the year she came home from her last round of treatment, and said, "You kept me going, Claire." The door opened. David's lawyer appeared and asked us to come back in. The revised proposal was on the table within 20 minutes. Equal 3-way distribution, as per the original will. No offset for accommodation. No adjustment for the prior financial contributions, given that the documented care value significantly exceeded any reasonable calculation of rent-equivalent benefit. David's lawyer presented it professionally. David signed where Gerald indicated. Marcus signed. They did not look at me while they signed. Afterward, Gerald gathered the documents and thanked everyone for their time with the measured, slightly ceremonial tone of someone who has presided over a great many difficult rooms and has learned to close them with dignity. He offered peppermints. David's lawyer took one. In the parking lot, Marcus caught up to me before I reached Patricia's car. "Claire," he said. I turned. He was standing a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, the snow coming down lightly on his shoulders. He looked, for a moment, less like the version of himself he'd been inside the decisive, slightly impatient one, and more like my brother. "I didn't know," he said. "What you did for her, all of it. I wasn't here, and I didn't know." I looked at him for a moment. I know you didn't, I said. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, not yet. But it was the truth, and truth felt like the right place to start. He nodded. He looked like he wanted to say more and didn't know how. That's always been Marcus. He runs out of words at the exact moment they'd mean the most. Come to Orangeville sometime, I said. There's still a lot of her things in the house. I could use help going through them. He nodded again. And this time it was slower, more certain. David took longer. 3 weeks, a phone call, and a conversation that went better than I expected and worse than I'd hoped, which is probably the most honest description of most meaningful conversations with people you've loved imperfectly for your whole life. He apologized. I accepted it. We are not close yet. I think we are moving in that direction. The house sold in May, a week after the market opened for spring. A young family from Brampton bought it 2 kids, a dog, an offer that came in clean and fast with no conditions. The agent told me they cried a little at the walkthrough, which I chose to take as a good sign. Before the closing, I went back one last time. The wraparound porch had been repaired the previous summer. I'd done it myself over a long weekend with a YouTube tutorial and borrowed tools from the neighbor on the left, the one who'd known my mother since 1987. The left side didn't sag anymore. I sat on the porch for a while. The maple out front was in full leaf, that particular deep green it always got by late May. The screen door behind me creaked in the wind. I thought about what my mother had said the day she came home from her last treatment, not the butter chicken evening before that. In the car, pulling off the 410 toward home, the fields on either side of the highway still brown from winter. She'd been quiet most of the drive. Then she said out of nowhere, "You're the steady one, Claire. You always have been." I hadn't known what to say, so I just kept driving. The road opened up ahead of us, flat and straight, all the way to the horizon. I kept driving. The things I'd like you to take from this. If you're sitting somewhere and you recognize any part of it, you don't have to explain yourself to people who've already decided what you are. You don't have to perform your worth to make it real. Show up. Keep records. Know your ground. And if the people who should have been watching weren't watching, if they missed it, all of it, the Tuesday mornings and the pharmacy runs and the late nights and the 1,000 small things that don't look like much from a distance but are, in fact, everything that is their loss to carry, not yours. The porch doesn't sag anymore. That's enough.